I love that intro. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is another Victory Sunday from the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. We got
Say that again, Coach. Say it again. It's a what?
It's another Victory Sunday here at the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. 3-0. Trojans are rolling well. We got the whole crew here. We got the man, the myth, the legend, the co-founder, the founder, Ryan Dyrud. We have the man with 1 million degrees from every Ivy League and every smart school in California. That's Jamal Maggie. And we have the world-class athlete, Candace. Oh, sorry. And the queen of LAFB. I apologize.
That's the crown.
Candace Davis Price. So,
Candace, you have to start doing that, okay, at the intro. That's what, needs to be done.
So the farm came in yesterday, and it was everything we did predict. We actually did have a sellout, but my boy Ryan, I coach with at Texas A&M Kingsville, he lives up in the Bay, said there was not a sellout. And he said the reason why it wasn't a sellout, and he would never believe it is a sellout, is because of this reason right here. And I'm going to show you guys. Let's see if it pops up. He said this seat will never sell out. So if there was 77,823 people there, and that makes a sellout, he's proclaiming that it's 77,822 because that seat right there will never sell out. So that right there, it officially.
Let's get our AD on the mic, and maybe our AD will make sure that those areas are not able to be sold on StubHub.
Yeah, I think they are. I'm pretty sure they're unsellable.
So
they better be.
So that prevented a complete sellout yesterday. But we're gonna jump right into this thing. Yesterday was really impressive. It was everything we expected it to be. Caleb Williams, I firmly believe, and this is just my opinion, and this might be a hot take, I don't care, but I firmly believe that Caleb Williams is using Fox and Shadori Sanders as a Heisman campaign motivation, because after every game they run the quiz to say he's in the Heisman race, and Caleb Williams comes out and says, "Hold my beer. I just want to show you guys something. I'm going to show you how good I am."
Yesterday, hold my Frosty, because Wendy's is plug.
Oh, so Wendy's is a sponsor.
He's got Athletic Brewing as a sponsor too. It's like that non-alcoholic beer, so you can hold my non-alcoholic beer.
There you go.
Got all the sponsors.
But if it's LAFB, it's hold my for the Detroit podcast, we only drink one beer, and it's hold my Fight on Victory Pale Ale. There you go, which is really good. We had that one, so
that's right. Stone Brewery.
Caleb Williams was a walk in the park from yesterday. It was pretty impressive. These are one of the things that you have. These are one of the things, and like I say, like make a statement, right? And these are one of the things that you have to go out and dominate teams like this and show why you're an elite team. And they completely did that yesterday. The late score, we knew the late score was going to come. I told Ryan and Candace that in the text message, like they're going to score a couple of more times, because I do think Troy Thomas made a mistake, and Lindstrom should have been the starting quarterback for Stanford. If he would have been the starting quarterback, it would have been a whole different conversation today. I think we would have still won, but it would have been a whole different game. But it was pretty impressive by the Trojans yesterday. I have no complaints. I'm going to pass it over to the madman. How do you feel about yesterday? What was yesterday's atmosphere like?
Yeah, Coach Rob. It was great atmosphere. I think it was, let's call it 67,000 there. A lot of buzz in the building. I think everyone really wanted to kind of give their final respects to the weekender and the rivalry. A lot of juice in the building. And I think the Trojans did what they were supposed to do, and in complete business-like fashion. And I think what was most impressive is that they had the discipline, they had the professionalism, and they had the approach of saying, we've got an inferior opponent here. Let's just knock them out, and let's not waste any time here. First 5-6 minutes was boom, 14-0. I mean, they scored on 7 of 8 possessions in the first half. Defensively, we saw kind of the big plays we were looking for, whether it was strip sacks, whether it was interceptions back to the house, whether it was tackles for loss. And then I think we saw a dimension from Caleb as well that we didn't see the first 2 games, which is sort of downfield accuracy. And that great ball to Rice. He had another couple really, that back shoulder throw to Singer was really beautiful. So they did everything that they needed to do. I think, Fred, you bring up an interesting point. I will say, in my 22 years of following this team, that was the worst Stanford team I ever saw in 22 years. And the reason it was the worst Stanford team I saw in 22 years is not necessarily from a personnel standpoint, just, athlete to athlete. The problem Stanford has is they're running Troy Taylor's system with David Shaw's players. And this is what happens when you hire a coach so late in the cycle, that now you're trying to run a spread offense with power and with guys, you're more of a Big Ten style, old school Big Ten style, and you're trying to run a spread. I mean, it was a disaster out there. They were running jet sweeps with Jurasic. I mean, Ashton Daniels is not a spread quarterback. That guy's a big kid, who's much more kind of in the box. And so I agree with you. They have no speed on the outside whatsoever. So great performance, but they were playing a team that was very, very compromised. And so they did what they were supposed to do. Kudos to the Trojans, 3-0. I think there's going to be one more game now, which is going to be another kind of glorified preseason game. And then I think things really begin in the second third of the season.
That's good. Hey, so Ryan Dyru, you was there. You was there with the media and was there for the press conference. What was the press conference like? What was the feeling of Lincoln Riley and the players that were there in the tent right outside the locker room?
Yeah, we're not in the tent anymore. Now we're in like a nice little room, but it's still small.
Nice.
Right next to the locker room, so we hear everyone behind us. But no, I mean it's kind of the same as it's been. Really almost unsatisfied. Like you get the vibe that they're happy with the win. Lincoln said at the beginning, proud of how the guys played. We prepared this week. We got the looks we wanted, and we capitalized on all the looks. But it wasn't like a jubilant presser. It wasn't like downcast. I'm not saying that at all, but it definitely was like they knew what they needed to do. They went out and handled it. They were a little disappointed by how the second half, like I know Coach Riley said, I know we had our second and third stringers there in the second half, but those guys are going to have to perform at some point. So we need them to perform better, and we need to coach better. And so it was just kind of that good same vibe we've been talking about on this show now for 2-3 weeks of this culture they're building that, it's never enough. Like you got to keep improving and getting better and doing that. So I thought one thing from the press I thought was cool. That 75-yard pass Jamal brought up from Caleb to B Rice on that great route. They said they've been practicing that play all week and they got the look they wanted. And when they were lining up, Lincoln was yelling something to Caleb, and Caleb said in the presser that he ignored him because he was afraid he was going to change the play. And he liked the look. So he just snapped it, and Lincoln jumped. He's like, no, I was telling you to throw it to Brendan. So, it's just, it's some fun little tongue in cheek between the two, but definitely you can tell they're not satisfied and they know that they still got a lot of work to do.
That's good. One thing I will say is that I know, and Jamal mentions is like we need to build an identity. I think that they're so loaded that there's not going to be an identity built on one person. And we saw that yesterday. Yesterday, Marshawn Lloyd, Austin Jones, and Taj Washington again. You know what I mean? And that's okay, because when we do need a big play, we have the guys to make the big play. Dorian Singer made a big play. Brandon Rice made a big play. Those guys are coming in the stride and they're going to be good. But I think the fact that there's so many weapons on offense, you can't just go into a room and say, all right, we're going to stop this guy. Okay, go ahead and stop Taj. I have Dorian Singer and Brendan Rice. Go ahead and stop Brendan Rice. I have Mario Williams and Dorian Singer. Oh, don't forget, I have Zachariah Branch. So there's so many things that's going on. With that, we're going to pass it to the biggest critic that we have with USC athletics and USC football. We're going to pass it over to the Queen. What is your opinion? You finally got to watch a game.
Man.
My first question is, this is a two-part question. Okay, so my first question was going to be, did you stay awake? So you did stay awake. What were your thoughts? What were your thoughts of yesterday's game and the last weekender?
Two major takeaways: versatility. You guys touched on it. You guys are the X's and O's, the stats, and making sure the names are said right. Everything you guys have said is the versatility, the different weapons. But I gotta shout out. I think it's Benny Wow. Do you guys even know who that is?
No.
Well, you should, because he is the director of football sports performance. That tempo of that game, the tempo of those players, Stanford looked flustered. It wasn't just, you know how teams are with a no huddle and they're like, as soon as Zachariah was down, he was up and Caleb had the ball. The casualness of their tempo, but was fast and explosive and speedy and shifty. That is sports performance. That is taking the tools and the weapons that you have and loading them with, in the best type of way, the type of steroids that you need that are completely legal, right? So I Googled this morning who their director of sports performance was. Highly impressed at his resume. Looks like he came from Oklahoma. So just imagine Oklahoma gets good athletes. USC gets the cream of the crop. Taking the knowledge that he's had, taking what he's done with the Sooners and putting it in the Coliseum. It was magnified yesterday. And I said in the text message, looked like USC had cheat codes. Bottom line, the way those guys were moving, the way they were comfortable with sprinting down the sideline and getting back into it, highly impressive. And I'll tell you this, a Bruin walked into my room and said, that's why USC is good. Like, man, I'm impressed by this game right now. I'm impressed, and walks out. I was like, oh, but you guys just beat the Aztecs, so it's all good. We're good in the house. So Brian Price, defensive tackle, he's like, man, that's impressive football.
I will ask you this question real quick, Ryan. Do you still think the Trojans are soft?
Me?
No, Candace.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Do I think they're soft? I saw a different football team than I saw the last 2 weeks. So based off of my criticisms, based off of my concern with us being a little bit of a different team than that Deion Sanders, like single parent, rose from the concrete, that type of grit, there are some little bit of those concerns. But that's not the only type of football player you have to have. Smart, IQ, ferocious. They demonstrated that yesterday. I'm not nearly as concerned I am as going to Boulder as before.
All right, Ryan, you had a question. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask Candace, you mentioned BP being the great D tackle he is. Has he talked at all about, Bear and Kion and those guys in the middle at all?
He was highly impressed. He was on the phone. He coaches high school football, state champs, Michigan. Hey, get on the thing. Let's see what they're doing. He's like, watch how he did this. And as he circled it on the screen, the first defensive play, they circled it on the TV. And I was like, okay, you might know what you're talking about. He had positive things to say in your football lingo. So he was, and he just kind of was like, and I was like, I think Chip Kelly might be calling you pretty soon. So
He should.
Tell Chip Kelly to call me too. Shoot.
They look like a different team. And what I guess I haven't been given Lincoln credit for, because I had a sentimental attachment to Pete Carroll. I mean, that was my guy. Like we walked our dogs together. So it's going to be very different. I probably won't do that with him or Jen unless they invite me on their private jet. That's a whole nother conversation. But he's able to, what did you say in the text? You said a surgical?
Mm-hmm.
Surgical.
Yeah, surgical.
Everything. That's meticulous. So if you can't, I don't think he's focusing on a different type to beat. He's doing what he knows really well, using the artillery that he has to take his guys to go out there and execute. So I was just, I soft. No, I'll take that back. And I never said the word soft. Don't put those in my mouth. I just said,
It's on record because you're like, we were in the basement and we had to make our own.
We did. We literally were thugging it, making our own protein shakes.
We were, but you have to remember the college football atmosphere has changed, and those are the type of things that gets kids recruited. So, but I just wanted to make sure that you got.
And I will say, Caleb, I was most impressed by his composure. Smooth. He was a smooth operator yesterday.
Okay, so
Fred, what's interesting is that Candace, I think it's okay to call them soft. I mean, I think that they are soft, frankly, because it's still Grinch. It's still Lincoln. Lincoln's never won a college football playoff game. He's gotten out physical year after year over 7 years. And playing Stanford, playing Nevada is not a fair enough test to say whether a team goes from soft to unsoft. So it's okay. That's okay to say that they're soft. They're playing a certain style of play. They're explosive. They're agile, as you say, Candace. They've skilled players all over the field. They're not kind of old school Alabama or what have you. I think it's okay to say that they're soft. That's fine. They're trying to win a certain way moving forward. And I think why we get this sense of this team being very even-keeled in the locker room, being, not necessarily very effusatory in terms of praise after the game or saying too many things, is because I think Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams understand the window of opportunity here. It's not every year you get the best player in college football. It's not every year you get the face of college football. And you can have there's levels to this. There's a difference between a 4-star and a 5-star. There's a difference between a 5-star and kind of an iconic player. And so, after this year, whoever USC's quarterback is going to be a great quarterback, no question about it. You've got the quarterback whisperer in Lincoln Riley, but is it going to be as good as Caleb Williams? I mean, we haven't seen an athlete like Caleb Williams grace Heritage Hall arguably ever at the quarterback position. So it's sort of a now or never. This is your window to come through in terms of being able to have more than just a conference title, more than just a CFP appearance. There's a real opportunity here to hang a banner, and I think everyone's feeling that urgency.
You're gonna get Candace fired up, Jamal.
What Lincoln Riley is saying to Caleb in the huddle is very different than what Deion Sanders is saying in the huddle. So that's all I'm gonna say. There's no Ogeron on the sideline getting in these guys' grills. There is none, right?
Y'all we don't know that.
Well,
okay, did you see Coach
Lincoln
Riley
was
on that
fired
third
up? Yeah,
quarter?
Lincoln was fired
They
up
were
yesterday.
They were up 46 points, and he was chewing people on.
Yeah,
on
he got mad at he got pissed off.
He's got to put on a show, right?
Nah, that was different. He was pissed off at his coaches and his players. Like they were fired up, and they were deep in a blowout.
I will spoons on his private jet.
I will say, all right. So this is what I want you guys to think about. Two things, because this just popped in my mind right now, and it's worth talking about. So, two things we're going to talk about. Let's forecast the rest of the season, and we'll start the way we have it up on the screen. We'll go Ryan, Jamal, Candace, and then after that, let's talk about the landscape of the college football rankings after there was a couple losses last night, and where do we see USC? So let's start with forecasting the rest of the season. Let's start off with Ryan, and how do you see the season going, and what do you see for record? So that's the same question for everybody. What do you think the overall record would be, and how do you see the season going?
Oh man, well, I mean, as we've been saying, it's hard to project just because the competition has been so low so far. I mean, USC's done what they've had to do. I mean, they've dominated pretty much. They looked a little sluggish to start in week 0, but they've improved leaps and bounds from week 0 to week 2 or 3, whatever we want to call it now. They've beat up on inferior opponents, but they've been surgical yesterday. The defense is flying around. They still definitely have some issues on the edge, as you always point out, Coach. But overall, I think the middle of the defensive line is vastly improved. The linebacking core, Eric Gentry finally back yesterday, got in his first play of the game, gets a tackle in that second half. Shane Lee looks much improved. Tackett Curtis is going to get better and better every single week as a young freshman. And Mason Cobb's been out the last 2 weeks. So they're going to get him back eventually. On the edge, Solomon Byrd. No one's talking about Solomon Byrd. Solomon Bird's, I think, played great so far.
Really good.
Really well.
Really good. And then Jameel Muhammad obviously has been great. And they finally get their first interception yesterday with Max Williams. And I think Kalen Bullock has looked improved. So it's been a definite improvement. So to answer your question, at this point, there's no reason why I shouldn't think this team can go undefeated. Now, they haven't been tested at all. So do we really have anything to back that on? But I'm not going to sit here and say because they've played inferior opponents, they're not going to play well against better opponents. I mean, they're going to definitely need to face adversity to truly show who they are. But at this point, 3 games in, winning by the margins they won, seeing how the offense is almost unstoppable, I don't see why there's any reason why they can't go undefeated. Will they? We'll see. But I know that's a cop-out answer, but I mean, they've shown us Ryan
Dyrud special right there in terms of an answer.
They've shown us what they need to show us through 3 weeks to play. So let's see how they get to it once they get to the meat of their schedule.
Jamal, I'll pass it over to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit more direct, Coach Rowe, because I think that's what you're looking for. But, I think, again, obviously this is there an offense better than this offense in college football? If there is, that team hasn't really revealed itself yet. So, you're absolutely elite on that side of the ball. Defense, I think they're incrementally better at certain positions, but it's really hard to gauge until you play kind of a quality competition. For me, it comes down to 3 games. I think it's at Notre Dame, it's at Oregon, it's home against Utah. I'll tell you, Utah looked very impressive yesterday on the road against Baylor. Without Cam Rising again, without Keithy, the way they were able to sort of grind that game, they brought Nate Johnson into the game, and it just sort of changed the complexion. Utah has a lot more skill guys than Whittingham has ever had. That's going to be a tricky game. So to me, it's going to come down to those 3 games. If they win those 3 games, they'll go undefeated. I think there's going to be a trip up, particularly on the road. I'm most concerned about Notre Dame and at Oregon. And I could see one loss, maybe even two in terms of those two games. I think they're going to run the table at home. I don't think Washington is going to be a problem because Washington is just a lighter version of USC. They're sort of, they're finesse, they're explosive on offense, just not quite as explosive as USC. I don't think the Washington game is going to be as problematic. I don't see much in terms of the schedule. So I think it's going to be somewhere in kind of the 1 or 2 loss range between that Oregon game and that Notre Dame game.
Mrs. Price, excuse me, Mrs. Price.
Are we being optimistic or what?
We're being honest. We're always 100% honest on Bet Online. Salute to Troy.
I agree with Jamal. I don't think they lose at home at all. That I haven't been there yet. I've been there before, but I'm looking forward to getting to the Coliseum. And like that entrance had me geeked up from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Okay. Especially, and I don't want to digress, but the fact that less than 3 miles from me, the number 2 team in the country played UNLV, and you could hear the stadium roaring. It was 111,000 people. And they just were like, rah, rah, rah. Like, really? Anyways, I think that we'll get a true test when we go to Colorado. I think Oregon will be tough. I think Colorado. What? Go ahead, chime in, Ro. I don't mind you interrupting me. I can be spoken over.
I just don't think that a true test would be against a team TCU is going to win 4 games, and Nebraska won 4 games last year, and they had 3 unforced turnovers yesterday. There's Colorado's have a lot of things going their way. This is not the Colorado show. We're not going to talk about Colorado.
Right. I'll save it for September 30th. I feel like I'm gonna bite my tongue if I say they take 1 loss, but if they do take a loss, it comes on the road, and I'm feeling like maybe that's Oregon, just to be respectful.
You don't have to be respectful. I mean, who do you think they're going to lose to?
I think Colorado's is gonna be tough.
All right.
And I'm wearing USC from Detroit all the way to Boulder. So it's not that I'm afraid of anything, but I know something about athletes. I know something about Prime. I know disrespect, but like Lincoln Riley, Deion Sanders in the back alley, who's coming out? Let's just keep it 100. So when you're talking about going to war and going to battle, what this guy is saying to his team, this guy used to ride on buses and have mold in his locker room. Okay. It's just a different climate. And I'm gonna just keep it 100. We ride now fly private jets and got Wendy's commercials. So it's just different. That's all. And those things, I know it doesn't seem, but that is, I would say, part of the code, the DNA of an athlete. That grit, that grind.
I will say this: the Sanders brothers are in a lot of commercials also. They're doing the same thing Caleb Williams is doing.
Deion's been riding private for about 30 years now.
Yeah, the Sanders they grew up on a whole like 40 acres in their own pond. They have a silver spoon in their mouth. Like
I wouldn't say silver spoon, but I get where you're going with it. But I digress. If
all right.
USC takes,
it's gonna be a great game. It's gonna be a great game.
I will say this. So, and I stand corrected. And after watching last night, there's still an edge problem on the defense. So actually, no, not Arizona State, but actually, I think their first defensive test will be when they go to Colorado, because that offensive coordinator is really good, and he's going to scheme up something that's going to get them going. I think that's going to be the first time they give up a bunch of points. But I think SC will come up on top. That's going to be one of those high-scoring games, 66-35, right? There's going to be some sweat, but it's going to be like, all right, we made it through. The loss I do see, and a lot of people are high on Notre Dame, and I've had the privilege to watch all 3 of Notre Dame's games, and they're very boring on offense. They're not explosive. They don't do anything great. They're under center, play action. I think their biggest play is probably the year is probably like 35 yards. They don't do anything that jumps off the screen that makes me excited. But their defense is really good. I will say that. Yeah, their defense is really good. That's going to be a game where I think that's going to be a test, like, okay, for Caleb Williams, right? I think if there is a loss, it's going to happen either in Eugene, because somehow SC and Oregon became rivals, and I don't know when this happened. I just got told this by an Oregon person yesterday that SC and Oregon are rivals, and I didn't know that. But
Yeah,
so
it's Fred when Oregon hung 60 in the Coliseum twice. That's about when it happened. Just FYI.
I got you. So that's
Yeah.
that's a rivalry game for Oregon. So they'll play a little bit above their head. But I do think that if Utah does not if Cam Rising does not come back sooner than later, if we get to the Utah game and that's only Cam Rising's third game back, then we dominate Utah. I do think Arizona is a problem. I watched Arizona yesterday, and Arizona is a problem. They went to Starkville in a hostile environment and took him into extra football. Arizona is a problem. That's a game we need to watch out for. It's one of those trap games where like, oh, it's just Arizona. It's not just Arizona. Jeff Fish has done a really good job and put those dudes in a good situation. Those are the games we need to worry about. There are some road games where we do need to be prepared. But this is like this week coming up is our first test, right? We're going on the road to handle business, and we need to see if we're able to handle business on the road. But also, I don't see anybody beating us. I don't see anybody in our conference that is good enough to beat us the first time. If we have to play somebody again in the Pac-12 championship, that's where I do see the issue, and I can't see us losing the Pac-12 championship again, running the game back. But I could see SC going through the conference schedule with a clean slate, and I could see us going into the Pac-12 championship undefeated.
Well, there is one team, Fred, that USC would play potentially in the Pac-12 championship game where they wouldn't be running it back, and that's Oregon State.
True.
That's my pick.
True. And Oregon State is not what people think. I told Ryan this. The only school that suffered from the Pac-12 blowing up is Oregon State because they won 8 games. They won 10 games last year. Now they might have an 11-game winning season. And now nobody's going to give them a chance. Oregon State is a Big Ten team. I don't care.
Washington State just took it to Wisconsin.
So here's the thing with Washington and Washington State. Washington State is a class team, right? So Oregon State.
I'm not even saying they're a Big Ten. I'm just saying.
I got what you
screwed over too. Like they're on the rise.
Yeah, they are on the rise. But how long are they going to be on the rise? And they kind of roller coaster. Oregon State, you could create a culture and keep it stable, right? You could keep it between 9 and 10 games. That's just what I think. But Oregon State in the Pac-12 championship is going to be tough because they have a solid quarterback that's doing really well in this new system. So that's something we might have to worry about, right? So that's actually a really good point, Jamal, like running it back. But oh man, I could see him being undefeated. The only game that will keep me up at night is the Pac-12 championship if it's a repeat against an opponent. So with that being said, okay, lot of big games yesterday. Texas went to T-Town. We had Oregon go to battle with Texas Tech. The Pac-12 is looking good overall. Cal did really well against Auburn last night, right? We had some losses. Ole Miss struggled with Tulane. The rankings should be coming out here. They might be out, and they might be out in the next hour. Do you see, and we'll just go around the room again, do you see SC moving up into the top 5 with the Alabama loss? Or is there still an SEC bias where SC stays at 6 and they drop Alabama to 5 and they move Texas ahead of us? We'll start with you, Ryan.
Oh, man. I would think, Texas was 11, right? It's who knows how they do these things. And the AP usually is a little more structured than what the college football playoff committee is. But I don't know if they'll jump Texas all the way up that many spots, but they do. Anyone that beats Alabama does usually jump pretty high. If SC moves up at all, it'll be one spot. If it hurts them, it'll just be their resume of who they've played. But I think if you see the eye test, I think they're worthy to move up one. I mean, Ohio State's had some struggles against inferior opponents, and they're a spot ahead of them. Michigan has looked good on defense, but they're not exactly putting up 50-plus points. I think they've scored 35 or less in both their games. So, the teams in front of them haven't exactly absolutely dominated their inferior opponents as well. But I think SC is either 5 or 6. They either stay where they're at or they move up 5. I don't think they move up too much.
Jamal?
Yeah, no, I agree with Ryan, Fred. I think, I don't know if it matters all that much at this stage. I think the bigger issue here is, I think when you look at the landscape of college football this year, let's just assume you have the 5 conference champions, and which one of those, and if everyone's got the same record, which one of those 5 gets left out, right? You got to go 4 out of 5 here. And I think that's kind of where my head is. I'll tell you the biggest game for SC fans where they need to scoreboard watch is next week, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Because I think that if Notre Dame beats Ohio State, I think that sort of delegitimizes the Big Ten a little bit, because there's already questions about the Big Ten, especially in how they've played the first 2 weeks of the year, where it's super top heavy with Ohio State and Michigan. And if Ohio State is coming now into a year where they don't really have clarity at quarterback, they're not quite as good as some of those Ohio State teams in the past. I think you're in a situation right now where the Big Ten might be a little bit behind the 8 ball, especially given where the Big 12 is this year with Texas, where the ACC is right now with Florida State, obviously the SEC. And I think that given the fact that this is the last year in the Pac-12, I think there's a reverse West Coast bias that's taking place. I think everyone is noticing the West Coast a lot more this year in a very positive way because the conference is blowing up. And so I think that if it were close this particular year, I think the Pac-12 is going to get the benefit of the doubt this year as opposed to in years past when they did not. So to me, I think it's going to be very interesting to see that Ohio State-Notre Dame game, because if Ohio State comes in and sort of rolls Notre Dame in Notre Dame, now all of a sudden, even SC's kind of marquee non-conference game, there's a little bit of an asterisk. It loses some shine. But if you have a situation where Notre Dame kind of pounds on Ohio State, now I think that elevates the Pac-12 even above the Big Ten in the eyes of many folks, given how well the Pac-12 has played non-conference and given where the Big Ten is in terms of just lack of overall depth of the conference. So long story short, it'll probably be 5 or 6. I don't think it matters. I think the big watch out one is next week's game.
Let me ask you this, Jamal, following up that question. SC goes to Eugene, beats Oregon. Oregon wins out. Oregon goes to Vegas and plays SC. Oregon beats SC. Do we get 2 Pac-12 teams in the playoff this year?
I think it's a couple things, Fred. I think it's going to depend upon, if you're assuming they're both at 1 loss, I think it's going to depend on how close those 2 games were. I think if one game was close and one team got rolled in another game, I think that's going to play a factor. And I think it's going to depend on who else is standing there. I think if you're in a situation right now where you've got 3 other undefeated teams and one of these 2 teams got rolled in one of the games, then no. But I think if you're in a situation potentially if all 4 teams have 1 loss and both games were really, really close, and maybe SC kind of won the neutral site game, the Pac-12 championship game, and lost a close one in Eugene on the road, I think there's definitely a path there where that could happen. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's a fun scenario to think about for sure. Look, I think the one other thing, Fred, I'll say here is we also need to see Lincoln Riley win a game where the talent level is equal, or where he's actually sort of deficient in terms of talent. 7 years, I've never seen Lincoln Riley win a game where there's been equal talent. He's always pounded on the teams that have inferior, talent. And then when he's got to go up to Oklahoma State, he loses. When he's got to go in the playoff, he loses. When he's got to play, a tough bowl game that's non-New Year's Six, he loses. So I get where we are. I get we're already kind of going ahead over there, but he's going to have to win some games this year where there's equal talent on the field, and he has not proven that over the 7 years. So I still have questions about this schedule, particularly at Notre Dame, particularly at Oregon.
I got you. Let's pass it on to Mrs. Price. What do you think?
I have to agree. I think that there is a bit of an SC bias, but I'm SEC bias. But I do believe that maybe we move up 1 spot. I hope Alabama plummets. Oh my goodness, just keeping that 100. But
I think they will. I think they will, Candace.
I mean, I've lived on both coasts and I've seen both. I've seen the SEC. I grew up in the Big Ten. I grew up watching, the real Michigan win big games and crush Ohio State. And I also lived through Ohio State giving Michigan. So I've seen both sides of it. The credibility of the Big Ten. Yeah, I'm definitely questioning that a lot, looking at Michigan's upcoming schedule, because that's how I have to dictate when I can go get gas and groceries, because 110,000 people will be coming down my street. But yeah, I mean, even like I said, I think this next week they're playing Bowling Green. They're playing a MAC school. So the fact that they're holding tight to number 2 makes me feel some type of way, because if Alabama would have smashed Texas, then maybe we're talking different. But I think maybe USC maybe they go up a spot, maybe. But I'm okay with us hanging. I'm okay. It's not about in this true fashion. It's not about how you start. It's totally about how you finish. So I'm cool with hanging where we are.
Oh, Pete Caroline.
Hey.
There you go.
Just for the
marathon.
Just for the sake of conversation before we end, because again, these rankings really don't matter. But can you see anyone jumping them? I think is
jumping.
Because if they stay 6, that means someone jumps them.
Correct.
So can you see anyone jumping them? And you can just answer that, Alfred.
I think the only people they will have jump them will be Texas. That's the only one I can see jumping them because of what they did last night, right?
Nah.
That's the only one. That's the only possible one that could happen. I will say this about it though.
For Sarkisian, we'll be optimistic for him. That's my guy.
I will say this. And I don't care about the SEC bias. I'm looking at schedule and I'm looking at conference and I'm looking at the game that I watched last night. Texas is better than Alabama. Alabama's going to lose 4 games this year because they don't have a quarterback. Their defense is amazing, but they don't have a quarterback. Their skills are amazing, but they don't have a quarterback. They have a guy who's going to run and can only throw the deep ball. In reality, when you really look at the SEC, it's not a good conference this year. It really isn't. Georgia played UT Martin, and yesterday they played Ball State, and they're still the number 1 team in the nation. That's not fair.
That transfer portal has changed everything. The guys that want to come out of school and go to the Alabamas, that want to go to the SECs, that go to the Kentuckys, they go to those, are now transferring. They're playing 2 years and a team is becoming, an Alabama, and that Alabama is not the same. So I just want to touch on that. That transfer portal has really shaken things up, because guys that want to go to the SEC, like a Bear, is now on the West Coast with Palm Tree. Dropping the mic on that one.
So yeah, but I will say this: I see them staying where they are. I think Alabama will drop to 5, and the rest of them will move up, just because of what's going on. I just see Texas may move up to like 7, right? But I don't. It's just going to shift. So whoever 2 and 3 is, they become like whoever 2, 3, and 4 is.
Michigan, Alabama, Florida State.
So those guys,
those 3.
Yeah, those move up, and then Alabama drops down to 5, and we stay where we are. Which it's fine. It doesn't matter till week 8, right? When the college
Texas
football
thinks they're going to jump SC in the poll, they're going to have a riot in Los Angeles, because everyone that's going to be feeling about that Vince Young touchdown, they're going to be having some feelings. So it's not going to happen. They don't want those problems.
Fred, the one thing I'll say is, last night felt a little bit different in terms of Alabama losing. When you look at kind of 2 years ago, they lost in the national championship game to Georgia. They were down their 2 best receivers, barely lost that game. There was sort of that was just a tough break. Even last year, there was kind of a perception that they sort of underachieved with their roster. But, Tennessee kicked the game-winning field goal on them. I mean, they lost 2 games last year on a game-winning field goal. When was the last time Saban lost by double digits? I mean, you got to go back to probably 08 in that Utah Sugar Bowl, when they just didn't 08 or 09 it was, when they just weren't ready to play. They didn't want to play Utah in the Sugar Bowl. They got pushed around last night at home against a team that was sort of bigger and stronger. It really felt like last night was a turning of the tide, no pun intended there. From sort of an era perspective, that we could be sort of witnessing the beginning of the end of Alabama here. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how voters respond to that. Is it that, okay, Alabama's maybe on the decline, they're not as good, so Texas will jump, but they'll only jump 4 or 5 spots? Or will they assume it as, this is the team that kind of ended Alabama's reign, and so as a result of that, let's have them jump significantly the way Florida State jumped against LSU the week before? So it'll also be a little bit interesting to just see kind of the mind of the voter and how they're thinking. in terms of how much Texas jumps up. And maybe that's a little bit of a breadcrumb in terms of how they may think in week 10, week 11, week 12, when these things really matter.
I got you. I want to wrap this up because we got NFL kickoff happening soon here. First week in NFL. But I want to ask.
Second week in Detroit, buddy. Second week in Detroit, buddy, because we took down the Super Bowl champs. Just want to drop that out there.
Detroit played on Thursday.
Right.
Take it easy. It's all week one.
I've game my whole life. All right, let me have it.
I will say I want to ask this question, and it's hypothetical, but I just want to get your opinion on it. Right? So say, CBS comes. They go to the Pac-12 commissioner and they say, we want to give you, and I'm going to throw a crazy number out there. We want to give you $100 billion over the next 20 years. But the only stipulation is you have to get the conference back.
Woo!
We'll give you this TV contract. You have all prior to CBS. We'll give you this TV contract, but you have to get the conference back. Not only that, we will help the other schools pay the fine for leaving the conference. Does that happen? Yes or no? I want to start with Jamal. I want to get the most
Fred,
educated value out of this. I
think it's over for the Pac-12, and the reason I say that is, if there was ever anything remotely close to that, like what has changed in the last 2-3 weeks? We saw that the Pac-12 had a nice Saturday, but they also lost some games, right? I mean, there was lost some games that they haven't quite had that signature top 5, top 2 win just yet. So what has really changed in the first 3 weeks of the season versus the negotiations that was taking place in the offseason, where if there was any kind of deal anywhere close to that, I mean, Kleefkoff and his brass and some of the Pac-12 presidents were thinking that they were in line to get $50 million, and they got sort of laughed out of all of these negotiation tables. That's how the Big 12 was able to sort of slide in and get their 31-7, because that 31-7 was sitting on the table for months. But they thought they could get 50. Nobody bid at 50, not even close. So to say that they're going to now, bite at 100 over a more extended period of time just because the Pac-12's had a nice kind of non-conference start to the season, I think that's a little bit far-fetched. I don't see it happening. I think we're in a world of the Pac-2, and I just hope that for the sake of Oregon State and Washington State, that if I was George Kleefkoff, today, God forbid, but, if I was sort of cursed to be him in terms of from a professional standpoint, I would be spending every waking hour trying to figure out how to position Oregon State and Washington State to be able to find them the right home. And that, I would feel so indebted and obligated to that. That would really be my focus. I think the ship has sailed on the Pac-12, unfortunately.
Well, with that being said, Oregon State and Washington State are staying loyal to the Pac-12 and filed a lawsuit against the other presidents of the school to stay out of the Pac-12's business so they could rebuild the conference. Ryan, I'm going to pass that question to you. What do you think? Does it happen? Yes or no? Is this hypothetical? I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just curious.
The only way this could happen, and I don't even know if this is even more hypothetical because I don't even know legally how you do this, but the only way that happens is if someone like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Tim Cook buys the conference and runs his own operation for TV deal and does it all for profit and blah, 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 which obviously I don't even legally know if that can happen, but that's the only way. I mean, it's done. It's gone. No one's going to be able to pay SC or UCLA $100 million each, like they're getting in the Big Ten. No one's going to be willing to pay Arizona $100 million a year. Like, they're a rising school, but they're not going to get $100 million for anything. So no, I'll keep it short. It'd be nice. We'd love to see the Pac-12 back, but it's not happening.
Fred, the one thing I'll just interject for 20 seconds, that the more interesting scenario is, are any of these schools going to get paid out over the lifetime of these contracts? Because if you look at where college football is heading, when you talk about 4 super conferences, when you're talking about now a 12-team playoff, think about the implications of a 12-team playoff. You're starting to really devalue the regular season. You're going to now be in a position where 3 lost teams are going to be able to make the top 12. And if a 3 lost team is going to be able to make the top 12, from a viewership standpoint, do you have the same desperation to watch every week the way you do today? What makes college football so special is that every week is sort of life and death, and we're arguing over a 1-loss team. 3 or 4 times in the history of sport has a 2-loss team kind of made a final game or what have you. Now you're going to be headed into a scenario where a 3-loss team can make the top 12. what does that mean for the regular season? When you think about kind of the NFL ratings, most people get kind of the 2 games that are on TV, during the afternoon, and the Sunday night or Monday night or Thursday nighter. Not everyone is so desperate to kind of get Dish or DirecTV to sort of watch their particular game. So it's kind of interesting whether any of these contracts are going to come home 7, 8, 9 years from now, given how we're sort of professionalizing college football. And are people going to start kind of devaluing the regular season? Not to the extent of the NBA, but we are going to lose some of that desperation in the regular season, and how that will translate into viewership, I think, is going to be the real fascinating question.
The one thing just to play devil's advocate, and I agree with you, but just to play devil's advocate, when you look at the casual fan, and I'm looking at you, Los Angeles, a lot of people, when you get that one loss, are just like, all right, season's over. Like, I'm over it. Colley's empty, because it's like, okay, it's it. That's done. Whereas now you might have that, like, well, we're not done. Like, we can have 1, 2 losses. So
it's going to be fascinating how that pendulum goes. But I think I don't know if everyone has completely thought it through with some of these big media deals, and to see how they come home, I think is going to be really fascinating.
I will say this, and this is from experience. Being a 2-loss team, but being the best team at the time of the championship, the playoff needed to be extended. When I played in college, I never lost in November. I never lost in December, and I never lost in the new year in January. So there are teams that injuries happen and all those things. It's about the hottest team. 12 teams, I'm with you, Jamal. 12 teams is a lot. I say expand it to maybe 6 or 8, but 12 is a lot. But also, you don't want to leave out the Tulanes of the world and all those things, because Tulane proven to be pretty good, right? So Tulane needs an opportunity. So you have to find a way to do it, to make it all work. You have to find a happy medium with the least amount of conflict, because you can't make everybody happy, but those people who are unhappy have to be a low percentage compared to the people who are happy. So I see that done. All right. I don't want to hold you guys up from kickoff. I thank all you guys for joining in this Bet Online Salute to Troy podcast. Another victory Sunday. I thank you guys for taking your Sunday morning out. I hope you enjoyed your breakfast. Candace, you get back to work, get them kids right. You got a state championship.
Next night of champions, I'm building them.
Thank you guys for joining. We'll see you guys tomorrow. You know how it goes. Live free, fight on.
See ya.
Eat it. Drink AG1.